Hi, this is Tim Grant, and this is part one of three of a deck tech series that I'm going into for the Bravo deck that I played to a first place finish at a Road to Nationals event at Most Excellent Comics and Gaming in Enfield, Connecticut. So, the reason I'm doing this is a lot of discussion goes around on Facebook, YouTube, and Discord on just what cards people are picking, and there's usually not a huge amount of discussion as to why people chose something or the thought process of going into the actual deck. Usually it's just little tidbits of information here or there. So I'm making this series a three-parter where we go into the deck and then actually figure out kind of why I chose a bunch of stuff, what are the play lines that I'm looking for, and just how I play the deck. Just with any card game, there is no one way to pilot a deck. It's whatever you want to do. So this by no means is telling you this is the only way to play Bravo, or this is the best way to play Bravo. This is just how I play Bravo. And then just going into my thought process. So you may have a completely different game plan, but I hope that you get some information out of this, and then maybe it helps you in your competitive events. So the main goal of this deck is primarily to outlast the opponent and attack their cards. So Flesh and Blood is all about basically every single card can do different things: attacking, defending, using them for resources or utility. So even though the game ends when the person hits zero life, pushing cards out of their hand, attacking their arsenal, and just forcing them to do something with cards in their hand and get them out of the game, basically block with them, or just tank up their effective threats, is kind of how I play this deck, where I'm more looking to get to kind of a game state where I'm forcing cards out of their hands so they can't come back at me with a ton of damage. So it's kind of, I guess you want to put it in a control style, but it's more on attacking their resources and their cards and getting in chip damage and getting in damage here is still good, but you're really trying to just push cards out of their hand. So the core of the deck is 38 blues, 7 yellow, and 15 reds. So in the center here, these are pretty much all the blues that I'm running. Main deck, and then we have stuff in the sideboard. The 7 yellows, which are the pummels and disables, and I have the remembrance. And then the reds are usually the cards that you're playing the first time you see them. Usually, you may be banking up on a Crippling Crush or a Spinal Crush and waiting for a back to back, but those are typically the things that you're looking to play. The equipment that's kind of standard, or that I run basically, is Anothos. I run Easton's Peak over Skullcap just because I like the ability on Easton's Peak. Tech Plate is just standard, same as Crater Fist, and then I run the Iron Rot legs. I don't run Tome of Findall, so I don't need the Mage Master boots, and then I don't actually have Time Skippers either in this build. Those are pulled out, so I just like having the Iron Rot legs to go after on hit effects. So the way I have this organized is actually very specific, where I come from a Magic the Gathering control player background. So I've actually organized these into kind of these are the two haymakers or the time walks. So basically, they're worth like two turns of tempo. Where if you throw it at someone, if it hits, it kind of steals their next turn, and if it doesn't hit, it's usually chewing up enough cards out of their hand and or arsenal to basically have the same effect, where their next turn is kind of worthless. The bottom section that I have here, this is the core kind of defensive package of just defense reactions that are pretty flexible, and then Blessing and Deliverance, which is less a life gain card and more that this card really reads attack 6, gain X life. So it's more just to kind of keep up the tempo and keep up the pressure. It's a filler card, and you also use it a lot to basically upgrade your arsenal, where you can filter through your deck just a little bit more and then go find your big heavy crush effects. So it's putting a little more pressure on the opponent, trying to get another card or two out of their hand, and then gaining a little life on the side. The Unmovable is just kind of standard. It's a 3, so it works with your hammer, and it works with Blessing, so that's why it's pretty much main board. And then Sink Below, I primarily use it main board just because it filters. So it's kind of like Blessing and Deliverance, where you're upgrading your arsenal or upgrading your hand. If you hit the double red or the double yellow and you really want to go find another resource, Sink Below is great for just using it to defend with, even if you're overblocking, and then cycling something away and getting a new card. This middle section is what I kind of call disruption. So this is what you're usually playing to go find a pivot turn or get cards out of your opponent. This is where you're really attacking with something that's kind of cheap and trying to force your opponent to either overblock, overcommit, or just come through and take something out of their hand. So I'm running the Command and Conquers. I know it's a bit of a debate on that, but I really like it because it costs 2, so I can actually Surge token Command and Conquer, and they have to respect it, and then that sets me up into the next turn. So even if they just block with 2, and then don't actually and they don't actually take the hit effect, it's still really good just because it's you pitch a blue, you get 2 cards out of their hand, and you set up for a follow-up crush. I'm running the disables, the extra disables, because they're kind of like CNC as well. They cost actually 1 more card, but you can dominate them through just to force something out of their arsenal, force them to use a defense reaction, or just get in for more chip damage. So they're kind of the same vein, Command and Conquer and Disable. I'm just liking running both in this build because even if I don't have a Surge token to either dominate or pummel the Disable, I can still play it for 5 and set up a Surge for a follow-up turn. So it's been really useful in just kind of finding the pivot turns and keeping up with tempo. And then I'm running quote unquote 6 pummels, the yellows and blues, and then I run the 1 energy potion. Most of the time, those pummels are being used on disables, command and conquers, and spinal crush, sometimes a hammer. You almost never are going to use it on crippling crush. Usually, I'm just trying to force cards out from my opponent, get their defenses down, so that crippling crush can just come through kind of unblocked. And so that's why I run the 6 pummels. The energy potion is quote unquote the 6. Basically, I use this if I'm kind of on the back foot and I don't have a turn where I want a hammer and I have the energy potion. I can just play it out, and now all your extra cards throughout the game are basically bluffing pummels, which is why I really like just the one of. More than one can be kind of a liability, so that's why I don't run that many. And then the middle section is basically all your blues, running 38, but that includes the unmovable. 99% of the time these are just being pitched, but the ones that sometimes see play, Rouse the Ancients is good for aggro, good for Prism, so that stays in maybe half of the games. Disable's probably played the most. It's just another blue, but it also attacks and goes after cards. Stamp Authority is kind of rare. It's usually just a pitch 3, block 3, and cost 3, but it's kind of rare that you use it. Showtime actually shows up a decent amount depending on the matchup. So, a great turn 1 play is just Surge token into Showtime and just get the ball rolling. You usually not seeing it too often in the mid game, but it's still just a nice card. Towering Titan almost never gets played. Sometimes you'll just get lucky on turn 1 and be able to throw out the Towering Titan and push something through. I'm almost never playing it except for maybe you're looking for it in the Pistol Dash matchup. So it's actually really rare that you use it, but I still keep it in just because it pitch 3, cost 3, block 3. And then 2 last ditch effort for the fatigue game, which I almost never get to. So that's why I actually cut it down to 2 instead of 3. And then I run the 1 Remembrance main board, just being able to cycle back some of your threats, Command and Conquers, Crippling Crush, Spinal Crush, sometimes Blessing and Deliverance. It's pretty key for this deck. Like, you really need this card. It only gets pulled out in 1 matchup, and it's actually why I run 2. So that's the main build of the deck, where basically it's trying to attack cards and remove cards from the opponent. Hammer spam is kind of a constant. where you're going to be, if you're on the back foot or if you're on the defensive play, you're going to be taking 2 to 3 cards a turn, just blocking up, maybe even 4, and you have to just be fine with that. That's just how control kind of plays, is outlasting their threats so that your threats can actually come through harder. So don't be afraid to just dump 2 to 3 cards into blocking and then just following with a hammer, and basically waiting and looking for back-to-back haymaker turns, pivot turns where you can change the tempo of the game and then go on the attack mode. So that's kind of the core of the deck. Whenever sideboarding, I'm still trying to go for that game plan, but usually the sideboard is there just to hedge bets and keep the defensives up a little bit better. I'm usually not trying to just counter someone out. So that brings us into the sideboard, where I don't like the philosophy of silver bullets in Flesh and Blood, or even thinking about it. The game's just going to get broader. There's going to be more heroes, more strategies as the sets grow, and because this is kind of a legacy game, finding silver bullets just, it's going to become harder and harder and harder as it goes. So you have to keep your sideboard options kind of broad, and really you should be changing your playstyle during the game rather than just trying to build a deck that beats everything, because it's just not going to exist, and it's going to get even harder as the game progresses. So the sideboard, since I come from a Magic the Gathering background, I start with 60, which is the center core, and then I have the sideboard where I swap stuff in and out. So I actually do run 3 Null Rune, just for Kano, and it does come up, and I have played against the Kano in Road to Nationals, and 3 is actually fine. I calced all the numbers and ran numbers in some spreadsheets, and I just found I couldn't race a Kano. I didn't have enough life gains because I don't run sigils. So I ran the 3 Null Rune. Zealous Belting is primarily there for Prism. Basically, it's a go again attack that's yellow. I can still make a Surge token off it, and then I can just follow up with a hammer, so it's kind of nice. There's other cards out there, but this is the one that kind of did the best for me because it was so easy to get the go again and keep it going rather than relying on something like Outmuscle. I run the blue Staunch Response. I was running red for a while. I still kind of miss it, but blue is super helpful where even though I'm bringing it in on a bunch of matchups where we're going tall or fighting against someone who's going tall, uh, blue at least gives me the resource to keep up with pressure. So it's just been nice to have. I still kind of waffle back and forth on that one. Red Fate Foreseens, just your standard zero cost defense reaction. Really strong in the wide decks because the breakpoint for a lot of attacks is 4. So you see a lot of the red attacks that are coming in on wide decks are 4 because they're trying to just get one over your standard 3 block. So running the extra Fate Foreseens to help stop mostly on hit triggers. That's usually where I'm using these defense reactions. I do run the 2 Snag for the chain matchup. They're they're really good for when you're turtling because then you can at least block. Basically, it says like block 3 if it's a rift bind. If you can get more than 3, then it's even better. Less than If you're stopping less than 3, then it's not a great card. I actually am a little iffy on it. I might drop it to 1, but so far it's been fine. And then I run the extra remembrance for the control matchups in the long games where, yeah, I'll just be throwing crushes at people and command and conquers and getting back blessing and remembrance in like a Katsu control matchup, but having the second remembrance just gives you 3 more cards and actually kind of pushes things even further where they have to be on the back foot for a longer amount of time because now instead of recurring just 3 cards, you're recurring 6. So I have had the game of like 6 command and conquers versus an Azalea, or sorry, 9. That was more of a testing game, but it does happen. So the last section of this is just going over to some of the alternative cards of why I'm not running them, or just why people like them and why I'm not running them. So the first section is the life gain. So Tome of Findall and Sigil of Solace, and that's why there's Mage Masters. I just don't particularly like straight up life gain. I like to turn off on hit triggers. So Sigil of Solace is really good in the matches like Katsu, where if they're just doing chip damage and leaking through for one or two at a time, it's more efficient just to gain the straight up three life, because then you're not using an entire card and overblocking and wasting a card to stop something small. You can just let it through and then recover from Sigil. That's where it really shines, and same with kind of Tome of Findall. But if I'm playing kind of aggressive and I'm just trying to get cards out of them or get cards out of my opponent, I'm trying to just keep up pressure. These cards don't really do a whole lot for me. If I'm really trying to stop damage, I'd rather just block. So that's why I run Blessing and Deliverance, where it's a little bit of life gain. It's a little bit of keeping up tempo and being able to hammer. And it's a little bit more of a kind of all-rounder card, because if I really just need to save three life, I don't need to play the Blessing. I'll just block with it. It blocks for three, which is exactly what I need. So that's why I'm kind of off on the life gain package right now. I don't have time skippers in here. I just really don't. I don't like how it costs four cards to do a double attack. It is a nice emergency button against Prism if they get a double Spectra on you, so it might come back in, but it's just it really frustrates me that it takes four cards to attack twice. So it's pitching one for the time skipper, play the attack, pitch for the attack, and then pitch for a hammer. So that's four cards, which means that if you're using four cards from hand to do all of that, you're not blocking whatever they followed up with on their previous turn, or on their turn going into yours. You're just not doing anything. So you're just kind of taking whatever they got, just taking it straight to the face. So keeping on with Prism, Outmuscle and Lightning Strike, they're both go again attacks. Uh, Outmuscle I really like just on its face. The only problem is Prism has a lot of six attack heralds that can just stop it from having go again. So you need to lean on a Pummel, and I don't like that. Where finding that combo is, it's not a guarantee. I'd rather just have the straight up go again on a Zealous Belting. It's easier to pull off when you have so many blues that are sixes and fives. You could run the reds, but I like having a couple more things being open to keeping the go again on. And it's yellow, so it goes after a library. Uh, I don't run the Lightning Strike build. It blocks for more, but I like Zealous Belting because I can pitch for Belting and then go into a Surge token and then follow up with a hammer. And Lightning Strike takes up an entire card, so I lose that chance for a Surge token. And yes, and Lightning Strike blocks for three, but if you're playing into a Prism, it doesn't matter. The three doesn't matter at all. You're either using it to block a Spectral Shield shot, which is one, or you're blocking out a Herald, which why are you blocking with a five? You should be blocking with a six. So this doesn't actually do much for the Prism matchup. Righteous Cleansing I like a lot in the control matchups. I just don't have it in this one. It might make its way back in. It's just really expensive for what it does. And I was finding that there's a lot of aggro out there, so finding pivot points and keeping up tempo I was finding was more important than trying to land a Righteous Cleansing. Mangle is the one card that's probably coming back in, maybe even two, because it's so relevant in a bunch of matchups like Bravo and Bolton. There's a bunch of armor out there that if you can just take it out of the game, it just disrupts the whole flow. So this is the one card that I'm probably bringing back in, and it's also one of my favorite Crush cards just because it's so potent and so scary. Red Staunch Response I talked about earlier, but it's super efficient for what it does. I would like maybe I'll shove this thing back in, but the reason that I like the red is a lot of those wide decks that are going for four attacks, they're also trying to buff for three. So this actually comes in and blocks an entire buffed attack out. So if it's like, you know, meet and greet for four with a howl or a plunder run, that's for seven. And then this will just stop it straight up without having to pitch extra. And a lot of those decks are trying to, especially Chain, is trying to chip in for one arcane or maybe two, and then come in with a decent attack. So they're trying to basically attack you on two different fronts and then cause a little bit of damage to get through. Staunch is really good at stopping that because you can pitch to stop the arcane damage and then still have two floating for a Staunch Response, which is why the 7 on a red is actually really relevant. I like Stonewall Confidence. It's right now it's just kind of awkward, especially with Chain. It's just not fast enough. I do like the card a lot. It's just really hard to time it right. It's less on, trying to block out your opponent's turn, especially if they're going wide, and it's more of another one of those pivot cards where you're trying to stop your opponent in their tracks and change the tempo of the game. So when you play out Stonewall Confidence, now your hand becomes like, at least I like the reds, where now you're showing your opponent, I have 4 cards in hand which blocks for 28. So you can either attack into a 28 block turn, or you can just let me keep my hand and not waste your cards and just do absolutely nothing because there's no way you're getting through 28. The last two are the red pummels. I run yellows and blues. Particularly, I run the yellows over the reds. The only time that I really find the red, or that I really want a red, is for Command and Conquer. So when I'm basically showing that I have a pummel, they'll block for 9, and then if I try and pummel over that, I'm just not getting through because it's a yellow. That's pretty much the only time that a red is relevant. If it's any kind of other crush attack, then most people aren't blocking for exactly enough on these crush attacks. No one's really blocking 11. They're always trying to skirt by with like either 8 or 9. And so just having the yellow, just pushing that through on your disables and your spinals, I've been finding it's enough. And then I like just having the extra resource. It just helps smooth things out when I'm trying to just kind of keep up tempo. I'm almost never, I haven't missed pummel in months, so I'm fine without the red. And then the last one's Arcanite Skullcap. Well, I don't own one, but two, I like the Eason's Peak. It's just more flexible. In terms of what you get, it's less flexible because it costs a resource and an action point and just ends your turn. But when you're really looking for a pivot point or just the extra card to block up when you're going turtle mode, um, it technically can block for more than an Arcanite Skullcap. It's just more annoying to pull off. But I just like having that option there. Especially it's really good with Blessing Deliverance. When you just whiff on the blessing and you're trying to keep up tempo, you can just whatever's left over and floating, throw it into a surge token, and then throw it into your helm, and then go up to 5 int. So that's basically the deck itself. Basically, we just went over the core of the deck, what I'm trying to do with it, going through the sideboard, and then just some options on other cards that people use that I just didn't work into this build. So part 2 will be piloting the deck, just what is pivoting, how I like to play the deck, lines of play and tips on those lines of play that I'm looking for. And then the third video will be matchups. So how I go into the Bravo mirror, how do I go into Chain and Prism, just those tips and tricks on going into those lines of play against those specific heroes. All right, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.